We're going to take a step back and look at a match that actually has one team that was ranked from this season and one team that actually almost got ranked but didn't make the top 25 from the coaches poll from August 16th of 2021. This match happened on August 28th of 2021, and the two teams that we're talking about today are Kansas State versus Nebraska. Now, normally I wouldn't be covering a team that isn't ranked from the top 25, but I think it could be an exception because of the fact that we got to see a Nebraska team, what their future holds, and we got to see a Kansas team that might be able to actually compete with Baylor and Texas this year. We still need to watch more film on these guys in general, but there were some things that would be very interesting for the average person to understand at this time, should they watch any of these matches come playoffs time in December. And with that today, guys, we're going to begin with today's video. We're going to first start talking about Kansas State. Now, something interesting with Kansas this coming season is that they only have one senior on their team. So this team is still pretty young. And not only that, but last season they actually were able to take third in their conference in the Big 12, I believe they're in. And Kansas hasn't ranked that high since 2008. And the fact that they are this young and they could potentially become a threat in the future in their conference that they're in. Not only that, but this squad is getting a lot of experience under their belt and being able to perform pretty decent, I would have to say. There are obviously things that they can easily work on, but as a whole, they're looking pretty good for the future. Now, one thing that does need to be worked on with Kansas a lot is their out-of-system does need to be worked on. They have really great pin hitters for their out-of-system to work. Some of those pin hitters are Alea Carter, Holly Bondi, and Haley Warner. Pretty good pin hitters. All three of them are pretty consistent at times, but things still need to be worked out in the out-of-ball system in order for this team to become a true threat. Kansas also as a team was actually pretty decent at blocking against Nebraska. In fact, during the match, they had a total of about 20 blocks in some way, shape, or form against Nebraska's 11. At one point, I remember even thinking about it, watching the match, Kansas is actually getting a lot of touches off Nebraska, and Nebraska is a pretty decent program in general. So the fact that Kansas was able to do this really just shows how good of a program Kansas could become soon if they keep developing at the rate that they're going. Not only that, but they're actually a pretty good, decent digging team as well. Against Nebraska, they had about 65 digs compared to Nebraska's 64. Even though it's just one more dig, it's just Kansas was in all the right spots defensively when it came to blocking, being able to slow down the hits for Nebraska, and being able to actually pick up the ball on digs. So they're pretty impressive at this time. Now, the thing that I find even the most interesting about this match in general was this did go to 4 sets, and Nebraska did win in 4. But in the third set in particular, it was all Kansas, okay? And this is one of the biggest reasons why. At one point, Kansas went on a 12-0 run, and during that 12-0 run, they were hitting at a .467 hitting percentage with no hitting errors whatsoever. Then by the end of that set, they actually hit 556 for a hitting percentage, and they didn't have a single hitting error for that entire third set. This is what makes Kansas so interesting to watch as a team this season, is they are very slow at getting going, and it showed because in the second set, they almost took the second set against Nebraska, and they were pretty slow at getting going. But once they get going, it's really hard to stop them. When they're feeling it, they are really feeling it. But Kansas can be streaky though, because like I said, they did lose in 4. But in general, if you're hitting about 556 with no hitting errors, that's going to be a hard time for any team who's competing at that time against Kansas State. Now, what's also interesting is they actually won that match 25-11, so they pretty much blew out Nebraska. That's how well they were playing as a team. And that's something I think needs to be watched at this season, is that you have a very young Kansas team that when they're feeling it, they're able to do what they need to do. I mean, like I had mentioned earlier, with the combination of Carter, Bondi and Warner as your pin hitters, pretty good. 3 solid hitters right there. All that's missing is one more middle, maybe even both middles, and you actually have a decent, solid team being able to compete with top-ranked teams night in and night out. Not only that, but I'm curious to know how they're going to do against Baylor and Texas later this year. Now, at the time of recording of this video, Baylor is about 1-3, I believe, and Texas is still undefeated. But they could give at least Baylor a potential run for their money, even though Baylor is claimed to be this really deep squad. Maybe Kansas is the one who upsets Baylor during this season. Texas might be another story. I don't know about Texas as much, but I still want to see how Kansas does against Texas, since Texas, like I said, is already in playoff mode. And if Kansas could make the playoffs as a 3rd seed from their conference, that would make things very interesting come playoff time, because Kansas might be able to make the 2nd round, might be able to make some noise depending on who they play. So I actually want to be on the lookout for Nebraska this season because, like I said, I believe they could make the playoffs, maybe make the 2nd round, or maybe they get eliminated in the 1st round. I don't know. But whoever they could play against, if they make the playoffs, they could make some noise. They might also be another reason why potentially Baylor doesn't get ranked as high come postseason if they play their cards right and if they perform well. So keep an eye out for Kansas, guys, because in my opinion, Kansas is a very young team. They're still learning. They have 3 really good pin hitters, and they're all still a pretty young team in general. So keep an eye out for Kansas. Kansas might be a very interesting team to watch. I believe they're in the Big 12 this year, so could be a very interesting team to watch for the Big 12, just for the fact of how young they are and how they're developing as a team right now and what they did with Nebraska. So keep an eye out for them. We learned a few things while watching the Nebraska match. Now, granted, Nebraska does have a couple injuries from this match, and obviously at the time of the recording of this video, some players have come back. But it's always good to see what Nebraska currently has to give us a better idea of what their future might look like. For instance, their freshman class that they've recruited, wasn't very impressed with a whole lot of them. I was, however, impressed with actually number 22, Lindsay Kruse. Lindsay's actually a pretty decent pickup for Nebraska this year. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point this season, if Lindsay actually became a starter for Nebraska. I think she's a really good opposite. The thing is for how young she is, she does need some help. And I think if Nicklin Hames, their setter, who at the time of this match had happened, was injured, but I think Nicklin Hames and Lindsay could actually have a pretty good connection. And I also think that when Lauren returns from her injury, that Lauren would actually be able to help Lindsay be able to reach her full potential hitting-wise. Because Lauren, as a middle blocker, is pretty good at being able to have the opposing blockers commit to her. She's been doing it for such a long time. But Lindsay's already a decent hitter as it is, and Lindsay would actually benefit a lot once Lauren comes back healthy from her current injury that she has. Now, with the setting position at this time, with the freshman recruiting class that they had, I wasn't too impressed with Kennedy Orr. At times, it didn't seem like Kennedy Orr was that into the match against Kansas State. I mean, she did pretty well. I will admit that. She had about 34 assists with 10 digs with only 3 service errors. But in general, she just didn't seem too interested in playing during that match. Now, granted, maybe it's just her personality. That's how she plays. But I honestly believe that Amy Evans is a way better backup choice if Nicklin Hames was ever to have a night off or if she ever got injured again. I think Anna Evans is a much better setting choice for Nebraska. I just don't see it with Kennedy Orr right now. I mean, she's a decent setter, but maybe it's just because she had freshman jitters at the time. Don't really know, but Kennedy, she might be a good setter starting next year once Nicholin Hames graduates. But I think this season, I think Annie Evans is a much better setter for a backup for Hames, should Hames get injured again. The other thing, too, is Lexi Rodriguez. I wasn't too impressed with her as a libero. I still believe that Kinsey Knuckles is a much better libero. Now, granted, they did say in the match that Kinsey Knuckles was having to play as a hitter this season for the time being, but Knuckles tends to be a much better passer when that's all she has to focus on. And so Knuckles, in my opinion, would be a better libero in general once the team gets fully healthy. Maybe that's part of Coach Cook's strategy right now, is to have Lexi Rodriguez get as much playing time as possible, and then once the team gets healthy, get Knuckles back as the libero, while still giving Lexi some playing time to get her ready for next season. But at least during the match, Lexi Rodriguez just wasn't that too impressed. I mean, she did have 21 digs in the set, but at times it looked like she was reading the hitters pretty well. And I'm curious to know if there actually was a stat on this. If we were to look at her digging errors, how many digging errors she actually had compared to what Knuckles was like during the match. Now, granted, Knuckles was only in for about 3 rotations at a time, but it still would be an interesting stat to look at. So if there's anyone who actually has that stat out there, it'd be great if you guys could actually put down in the comment section below what you thought. So, in my opinion now, I think one of the best lineups that Nebraska could have this season, and granted, this all has to do with the health of this team in general, and at least I have a couple of these positions down from my honest opinion. There's maybe 1 or 2 positions I might be missing, but this is what I think is the best chance for Nebraska to compete this season and win it all. I think you need Lauren Stivrins back. That's a huge, huge plus for them once they get her back from her back injury I think she currently has right now. Callie Schwarzenbach would be another good middle blocker to keep as well in the starting lineup. And then obviously you have Nicholin Hames as the setter as well. And then you need Knuckles back as the libero. Finally, Lexi Sun as an outside hitter. And then Lindsay Kruse as the outside hitter. Now, with that being said, I don't know who the second outside needs to be. And at this time, there really isn't someone who's sticking out the most. But that could be the best lineup for Nebraska to win it all. I mean, you have 2 middle blockers, a setter, a decent enough libero, 1 outside, and then a rising star in 22 for Lindsay. But after that, I'm sure they have another outside. Just not a whole lot of people stuck out to me during the match watching them against Kansas. But at least in my opinion, I think that's a decent enough lineup to get going. And the other thing too is it helps build for the future, because with Hames graduating, I believe, this year, and Lauren also graduating as well, you got to be able to start building for the future for Nebraska. And so I honestly think Lindsay would be the best potential captain in the making for Nebraska. Who knows at this time? Now, what I also would love to see too, I actually want to see the Nebraska versus Stanford match, which I believe is coming up soon, sometime in September. Now, what I'm going to find the most interesting is I really hope when they play this match that Nebraska puts their freshmen in, this top recruiting freshman class that Nebraska had. Now, granted, I did just say I didn't think they were that impressive, but this is the reason why. Nebraska has been said to be this top recruiting class that they had from last season going into this season. Stanford has mostly freshmen on their starting lineup. I would love to see how both of these freshman squads would play against each other when they do play, because in reality, if these freshmen are as good as they keep telling us they are, we could be seeing a Nebraska-Stanford going for 4 more years potentially in the playoffs of competing for the national championship if they're as good as they keep telling us that they are. And so I would love to see that type of matchup. Now, granted, Coach Cook might not want to do that when he plays, but it would be a very interesting matchup to watch in general, to see the freshmen go against the freshmen from these two schools, to see how they actually perform, how they're going to do in the future, because this is, in a way, what we might be seeing in the next 4 years. I mean, next season, Stanford is losing 2 seniors, and Nebraska is mostly going to be losing Lexi Sun, Hames, and Lauren for sure next season. So it'd still be very interesting to observe how these teams perform, especially when they're such young teams in the making, even though Nebraska has more experience coming into this season right now. But I will say this, though, for how much I am discrediting the freshman class that Nebraska has, Nebraska still has a pretty bright future if this freshman class can develop. At least against Kansas, there's probably a lot of jitters on the court with them. But at the time of this recording this video, we have an idea that potentially of who they are, and they could get a lot better as they progress in the season. So I'd keep an eye out for Nebraska. I mean, once Nebraska is fully healthy, health is going to be a huge issue for Nebraska this season. But if they can stay fully healthy, this team's going to be really fun to watch this whole entire season. Expect potentially a deep run in the playoffs. We still got to keep watching film on them, but at least during this match, it gave us an idea that if Nebraska doesn't stay healthy, their season, though they'll get better as a team, is going to be somewhat of a struggle in the long run. So Nebraska's whole thing this season is how healthy can they stay to win it all. That's it for today's video, guys. Like I said, Kansas State is an uprising team in the making, such a young team in the pretty much right now. So Kansas, we should watch them against Baylor and Texas to give us a better idea of who they're becoming and if they even have a shot of making the playoffs this year. And Nebraska, on the other hand, it's just Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska's whole issue is just health, at least at the recording of this video, and since the matches have moved on since August 28th. But Nebraska, if they can get fully healthy, is going to be a threat. Their freshman class is pretty decent, could use a lot of improvement in general, but they are still pretty young. And it's just always good to see what Nebraska has in the pipeline for coming seasons to come for them, since they're so good at recruiting players. So keep an eye out for them, guys, and we're going to keep hopefully talking about these teams going forward in future videos. But with that today, guys, I'd like to thank you for your time for listening to this YouTube channel today. I ask that if you like this content that you please like and subscribe, as every like and subscription we get can help grow this YouTube channel so that we can keep talking about the game of volleyball. And with that today, guys, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye.